The madness all started with this 57-inch NV Classic longboard deck. A friend of mine had one of these collecting dust in his garage. Like a mad scientist, I feverishly bolted a surf adapter onto it. The second I stepped foot onto this thing, I knew two things. Number one, I was hooked on these longboards forever, and number two, I was going to design my own longboard deck. So the first thing I did was buy every longboard deck over 50 inches long that I could find on eBay and Facebook Marketplace so that I could research and figure out how I wanted to build mine, and that resulted in the collection that you see here. And then I found a longboard press, and so for the last 6 months I've been pressing longboards in my garage, and that has resulted in what you see here, my first official longboard deck, the 50-inch Bigfoot. Most traditional surfskate decks confine you to a single stance, but the Bigfoot's expansive platform invites you to dance across its length. This isn't just another surfskate deck. It's a fusion of longboard flow and surfskate dynamics that opens up entirely new possibilities for creative expression. Whether you're carving deep turns, hanging 10 on the broad nose, or finding your flow through fluid footwork, the Bigfoot delivers a riding experience that's both familiar and thrillingly new. Welcome to the evolution of surfskating.
This thing feels like a perfect 10-foot single fin. Like a nice little 2-foot Malibu point break. This thing just goes.
Every specification on this Bigfoot has been painstakingly crafted to give you the optimal riding experience. So let's talk about each of the features. The first feature of the Bigfoot I want to mention is that it has concave, and this is a very, very big deal for these longboards, and that's because out of the 22 that you see behind me here, there's only 3 that have any concave at all. That is this 55-inch Sector 9 loop nose walker. This longboard Larry has a little bit of concave, but it also has a ton of camber, which I don't like at all. So this doesn't even ride for surf skates well anyway, so that's completely out of the picture. The only other one that has concave is this other longboard Larry, and this is just so narrow that it's not even an option anyway. So my point being, there's really only one option with concave. That's that Sector 9. And they make these longboard decks flat for a reason, and that's because if you want to have any concave in them, you have to have your own mold, and that's a much more complicated and expensive process. But it is so worth it because the concave feels so good, especially relative to these flat decks. I've been riding nothing but flat decks for about the last year and a half. So when you step foot onto concave, it is a remarkable difference. It feels so much better. It really helps you with that smooth rail-to-rail transfer, and it also makes your feet just feel a lot more locked in. The next feature I want to mention is that I made the Bigfoot wide at the axles. And that's important because that gives you a lot more control when the width of your axles is about the same width as your wheels. So I have a complete here, you can see, and you probably can't even see the wheel sticking out on the sides. You might be able to a little bit on the bottom axles, but you compare those to say like this Sector 9 here, where you have more of a pointed off nose and tail, and you can see that that makes that those wheels stick out on the side. And the reason why that's important is because when your wheels stick out, it makes it a lot more slidey. So having wide axles gives you a lot more control, and it just feels a lot better on a surf skate. The other benefit of going wide at the axles is that it makes the entire length of the deck wide, which makes for much easier cross-stepping. And that's as opposed to say like this pintail here, where you see how you lose a lot of space for cross-stepping up on the nose and on the tail because you lose all the width on the deck. So that width along the full length just makes it a lot easier to cross-step along the full length. The next important feature is that I gave the Bigfoot a broad, squared-off nose. And that is because it makes it a lot easier for hanging 10.
The big flat noses, I mean, your feet, when you get them up there, they just stay. And with the concave, it's just very slight, little single concave through the middle, and it's enough to keep the feet in, but still give you the freedom to really move it around.
So a lot of these other ones that I have, like this Sector 9, you can see how, again, that pointed off nose, it just means that your feet are hanging off the sides when you're hanging 10, or like this Kahuna Creations, kind of same thing, this Coastal, same thing. So it's the difference between this, where you can see my feet hanging off the nose, and this, where you can see I have plenty of foot placement for hanging 10. The next feature is that it has a perfectly balanced wheelbase for the ideal pumping feel. So this came out of a lot of experimentation, but I put the front bolt holes 4 inches from the nose and the rear bolt holes 7 inches from the tail. And that just makes the pumping feel really ideal on this. If you go further back from the nose or further in from the tail, you lose space for cross-stepping. And if you move them out wider, it just doesn't feel as good when you're pumping. The next feature to point out is that you can see I gave it massive wheel wells, and the purpose of these is to prevent wheel bite on all surfskate trucks. And you really only have to worry about wheel bite on the waterborne surf adapter, the Yao Meraki, and the old Smooth Star thruster. But this means that you'll be able to use any surfskate truck that you want with up to 70mm wheels with no concern of wheel bite. You'll also see that it has these big wheel wells on the rear as well, and that's for the same purpose, to prevent wheel bite.
Little wheel wells. When you dig it deep, no wheel bite at all. With the adapter, no wheel bite with another wheel wells. Really push this thing pretty deep. Yeah.
And the final feature I want to point out is that I gave it a straight tail, and that just makes for easier storage to lean up against the wall. A lot of these that you see here don't have that. Like this Kahuna Creations has a sharp pointed tail. This Longboard Larry has more of a rounded off tail. Or you've got this crazy Lucid one that has a really sharp pointy tail. And none of those are ideal for storage because they don't stand up straight. You have to kind of put them in a corner. And if you can't stand them up, then what are you going to do with them? Where are you going to put them? So I found that that straight tail is really ideal for these crazy longboards. In my shop, you'll notice that I have some purchase options for the Bigfoot. The first is obviously that you can just get the deck alone. And then I also have 2 complete options. One is this waterborne version, and another is this Carver CX version. So let me talk about the differences between these to help you decide which one's best for you. To put it simply, the main differences between them is that this waterborne surf adapter version will give you more lean and more range of motion, and with the Carver CX you get less lean and less range of motion on the front truck. However, both of them work and both of them feel fantastic. So just to visually demonstrate this, you can see that range of motion on the surf adapter, and here's the Carver CX. Another big difference is that the waterborne version has the rail adapter on the rear, and the Carver has the Carver C2 on the rear. And the purpose of this rail adapter is to keep your back wheels on the ground and give you a bit more lean and control through turns. There's another difference between these rear trucks that I want to point out, and that is that on the rail adapter, when I push this over, you're seeing how it's just going to go straight lean back and forth like so. However, on the Carver C2, when I bend this, you're going to see that it has almost like an arc like this. And so that is designed to work in conjunction with the front truck. So you see how these Carver trucks work together, how this one's curving in along with that front truck, and you do feel that in those turns. So that is a noticeable difference about those. But even still, you are getting more lean out of the rail adapter, and that's just going to be a personal preference. So here's the lean on the waterborne surf adapter. And here's the lean on the Carver CX. And you've heard me express a strong preference for this rail adapter, but here's what I'm going to say about the Carver CX. If you're used to a Carver CX and you like it, then go with the Carver CX and start with just the C2 rear first, because I've had enough people try these to know that that's just a personal preference, and there's many people who have ridden these who actually prefer the C2 rear. So if you lean towards the Carver CX, again, I'm going to recommend just start with that C2 rear, and if you like that, there's no need to get the rail adapter, and then you can always get the rail adapter later and just add it. Another difference to point out between these two is the weight. So the waterborne surf and rail adapter version weighs 13 pounds 7 ounces, and the Carver CX version weighs 11 pounds 9 ounces. So almost exactly a 2-pound difference. A final difference to note is the differences in height. This waterborne version is higher than the Carver CX version because you need to use any riser pads with the Carver CX. So that makes the Carver CX version lower by about between 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, somewhere in there. And that height difference isn't really noticeable when you're actually riding it, but where it's very noticeable for me is when you're pushing it, like when I'm pushing it up my campus and I've got one foot on and I'm pushing with the other foot. Being lower to the ground is much easier, so you will notice that on your push, but not a huge difference when it just comes to the ride itself. Both of these completes come with the highest quality upgraded component parts. So in the Carve CX version, you obviously get upgraded Carve CX trucks. You get Riptide 85A bushings on both the front and the rear. You get Surfskate Love 70mm 78A wheels, and you get G-bomb bearings. And you also get Riptide pivot cups, when that prevents any squeaking out of your pivot cups. On this waterborne version, you get the waterborne surf adapter on the front with the rail adapter on the rear. On this rear, I've upgraded your bushings to Riptide bushings in 87.5A durometer because I found that these perform much better than the stock bushings, which are very soft and in my opinion too soft, honestly, for really any weight. So in my opinion, I'm giving you the ideal bushings for this rail adapter. I'm also giving you Riptide pivot cups in this one, as well as the same Surfskate 70mm 78A wheels with G-bomb bearings. Now, one thing to mention about this waterborne setup is that I have not replaced the surf adapter bushing for you, and that's just because it's a big pain in the butt, so I'm gonna let you do that yourself. But I highly recommend it because I found that the stock surf adapter bushing is just too soft. It's 95A durometer, and you can get a Riptide bushing in 97.5A durometer that stiffens that up, and in my opinion just makes it feel a lot better, really for any rider of any weight, honestly. So those are your complete options, and to conclude, I'm really gonna just say, stick with what you know. If you already have and love a Carve CX, then start with the Carve CX. If you don't have either of these, then really either of them gonna work. Can't really tell you what your personal preference is going to be, but just go with what you're familiar with. Both of them work fantastic. You're gonna love them on the Bigfoot.